My name is Kaylin, for those of you that don't know me, and I'm going to be doing a video series on IVF, infertility, fertility issues, and struggles that unfortunately hundreds and hundreds and thousands of women have across the US and the world. And so I have been sharing some of mine and my husband's journey on Facebook since January when we kind of got this process started. Um, for me, for the first time, like actually doing stuff to my body, but my husband's been going through it for longer than that. Um, and so I've got a couple 31-day studies, prayers that I'm going through because my take on this is going to be from a Christian perspective. Um, and I have struggled with my faith for a very, very long time, in and out of my teenage years, in and out of my early 20s. And then going through this, I struggled with it a lot. And then, in May, it kind of it kind of came to a head where I just decided that I was going to put my faith and my trust in God and just let him be my strength, because as women we try to be our own strength and we try to keep going and keep pushing forward and keep doing all of this on our own, and that's what we're told we have to do by the world, and that is a load of malarkey. And so I want to have this space and this video series to try to give you an insight into maybe what it's like to put that faith into God, or to look at it from a different perspective if you're not part of that. And then if you're not a Christian and you don't believe in God and you want a place where you don't feel like nobody understands you, I hope that this series and that I'm hoping for the community that will grow from this and be a part of this will be able to help you in that. Um, so before I kind of share my story, I'm going to share with you what I'm going to use through this. I have two different Bibles here. Both are King James. I have this one here, which is the layman's Bible commentary series. It's the study notes from there. And then I have the Life Application Study Bible, also King James. Both are red letter because I'm a King James version Bible believer, and that's what I want to use. So if you want to use another version, that's entirely up to you. Any verses that I read or anything that I talk about will be based off what I've gotten from the King James. I also have my Strong's Concordance that I'll pull out if I need help with that too. Um, Now, some of the verses that I have in a couple of these are not King James, so I rewrite them in the King James, but where I'm pulling kind of this, at least this initial study to kind of get into it and go through, is going to be, I have this one here, which is 31 Days of Prayer During Infertility by Lisa Newton. And what I love about her is that um, she is she's your average Joe. When you read this, you don't feel like she's trying to come across with all the answers. She makes you feel comfortable and at home, and just like she genuinely is like, I don't have the answers to everything. Here's what I've gathered through my struggle. This is what I've got. And so I appreciate that with her. And then this one here is Waiting in Hope by Kelly Ramsey, and I think it's Jen Hesse, maybe Hess. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. But this one is a 31 reflections for walking with God through infertility. And I'm going to be, kind of going through these just to try to help. It helps me. I'm still going through them. I haven't finished them yet, but it's just been on me to start this series. So I kind of want to talk a little bit about my story, and I apologize for my wet hair. It was dirty. So I met my husband in person, actually 6 years ago today. We had our first date, and we had two parts to our first date. We had part one where we went to a coffee shop, and then we were there for 3 or 4 hours, and we talked about everything under the sun. And then we had part two where we went and saw the new Joker movie that had just come out. And then what was really cool was 5 years later, I think it was 4 or 5 years, we had the second one came out the same weekend of our first date anniversary. And so we went and saw that. But during our talk when we first met in person, because we'd met online, and so we'd been talking since August of that same year, and we stopped talking for a little bit and then started talking to each other again, and then met in person. And so while we're chatting, my husband, then nobody to me at the time, he said, what are your O moments? And I didn't know what that was. I said, what do these is your red flags? He's like, I call them O moments, things that you kind of go, oh, I don't know how I feel about this. And I said, well, a really big one is that I personally don't see anything wrong with it. Other people don't appreciate it, especially guys. I don't believe in sex before marriage, and I am not willing to do it. And so he was like, oh, okay. And so um, he he understood that and he respected that. And then I said, okay, what are yours? And he says, well, he has two kids. He had two kids. I knew that from a previous marriage. And I was like, okay, got that. He said, well, I didn't want any oopsie babies. And so I, in July, he had gotten a vasectomy because he didn't want any more kids. And I said, oh, okay. And to me, right then, I was like, that's a deal breaker. Like, I want kids. And so before I told him that, he goes, but for the right person, I would consider getting it reversed because he's like, I'd like a girl. Okay. Because both the kids are boys. And so I was like, okay. So then, we talked and everything. And then in December of that year, we actually got engaged. And then we got married. We waited a full year and got married in January of 2021. And a year later, almost a year later, we um we had a no, it was a year later. It was a year later. We found a doctor to do a reversal. And so we went and we had that reversal done. Doc said everything was good. Um, he said, it takes time for everything to start working properly again. And we're like, okay. And so then, nothing was happening. So, and as a woman, you start to think, well, maybe it's my fault. Maybe it's my fault. Because unfortunately, the majority of the time, it falls on us because our body is just not cooperating. And so we, um, you have analysis and stuff done, and we went through that process. And then my a friend of mine actually recommended her fertility doctor because she had seen that I had the sticks and all of the things in my bathroom, and she's like, well, you can have all mine because we're going to go this route. And I was like, okay. And so I got his name and I contacted him and we went in and we sat down and we had an evaluation, and he looked at some things, and then he recommended a doctor for my husband to go see. And so when you go and when you have this consultation, they do kind of a preliminary exam for you. And so for me, I went and he did that exam and he was like, you're good. He's like, everything is where it's supposed to be. You've got plenty of room. You're good. I'm like, okay, great. That's fantastic. So I'm sitting here thinking at this point that it's my fault and that there's something wrong with me. And so we went to that other doctor. And they did an analysis and then they called back and they were like, there's nothing. Like anybody who's taken basic anatomy or knows anything about this or has done the research, because if you are getting into this, going through the infertility, going through IVF, going through IUI, you're looking up everything. So you've done massive amounts of research, and that you have to have a certain amount of motility in the sperm, and you have to have it's got to be a certain number of live ones and a certain number of ones that are cooperating, and so they said that he had none, not even dead ones. There was nothing. And so that was devastating. And I actually got that news at baseball practice for one of the boys. And so that was super fun to have to keep myself composed because you allow yourself to hope. You're like, okay, well, they're going to come back with good news. And they're just going to say that, well, if we did an IUI, then, you're going to be good. And then they tell you zero and you're going, oh, okay. And at this point, we're in 2023. where we're trying, we're kind of getting this figured out. And then, we met with the urologist that my fertility doctor had recommended. And if you're in the need for one who does reversals, and you live in this area or you're willing to travel to the DFW area, Dr. Jeffrey Bush is absolutely fantastic, super nice. He talks to you like you're a person. He's really fast when he speaks, so you kind of think, oh, he's just trying to rush me out of here. No, that's just him. He's just a really fast talker. But he's super nice and he was great, and he didn't sugarcoat stuff. Like he told us exactly what we needed to hear. That was honest and truthful. And so there wasn't any trying to beat around the bush. It was like, no, this is how it's going to go. This is what it is. So we got back with him and he gave us our options. And so he ended up performing another reversal. And so apparently the first one, scar tissue had built up and blocked everything. So nothing was getting through. And so that's what happened there. So he checked everything, and my husband was even more, we're going to stay and be careful, and we're going to do this and this. And so we're like, all right, we'll just wait and we'll try it again. And then almost a whole year went by and nothing was changing. And the numbers were, sometimes they would go up, but most of the time they were going down on his analysis. And in November of 2024, I got impatient because, I had hope right after we got married, even though I knew it wasn't possible. I still had hope because you delude yourself into thinking that. And I'm gonna get some coffee real quick. And so, to me, I had been hoping since 2021, and we're 2024, trying for 3 years, in the world of the fertility and infertility and all IVF. It was only 2 because it wasn't possible because he'd had everything turned off. And so we discussed it briefly, but he was still, because when he went in to actually have a consultation with a urologist to get it reversed before we found the other doctor. And that particular doctor, I don't care for, and I don't remember his name, and I don't ever want to remember his name. But he tried to convince my husband not to have a reversal done and to just tell me to go through IVF. And then explained it to my husband, who then in turn explained it to me, that you take a piece of him, you take a piece of me, and you put it in the dish, and then you put it in the oven, and then boom, I walk out pregnant. And I was like, babe, that's not how that works. It's not how that works at all. He's like, what? And I said, did he not explain any of that to you? And he goes, no, all he told me was this. And I said, well, he's a moron because that's not how this works. I said, there's medications I have to take. There's shots I have to do. I said, and he goes, well, it's only $10,000. And I said, oh, no. It's $10,000 per attempt. And there's no guarantee that it happens on the first try. And he said, oh, I didn't know that. I said, well, the doctor's a moron because he should have explained that to you before trying to convince you not to have something done that you went in there to have a consultation to do, because you've had everything turned off, which at that point had been less than 3 years. And your chances of everything coming back decreased after that 3-year mark. And it was before 3 years when we were trying to get this done. And so at that point, it had been, I think we were at 2 years, or a year and a half, year and a half. And so when it kind of proved that his numbers weren't getting any better, because my husband, I don't know how much research he did into it. I'm not going to claim to know. So I know the research that I did into it, and the numbers that were popping up on his analysis were not getting any better. And so I was like, I'm going to call that other doctor. And so again, if you're in this area and you're looking for a fabulous doctor, Dr. Robert Kaufman in downtown Fort Worth is fabulous. I love him to death. The majority of his office staff is fantastic. And he's amazing. I have literally 0 complaints about him. He makes you feel like a human being. You don't feel like a dollar sign. You don't feel like a patient number. You go in there and you sit down with him and he talks to you, and he talks to you like you're a human. And I'm probably going to cry on this, and I don't care. But so I made an appointment with him by myself and brought all of the analysis for him to look at of my husband's. And he looked at everything and he goes, okay. He's like, yeah. And he knew I don't like shots. I don't like needles. I was 24 years old before I ever had my blood drawn. And 24, 26, 24, 24. I was 24 years old before I ever had my blood drawn. First time I ever went under was when I was 24. I don't do needles. I don't like it. I don't like shots. Um, I was that kid who would look up what ages you had to get your shots so that I could mentally prepare myself and hope that my mom would forget when I had to go have shots done. Um, so hang on, my husband he texted me. Um, he has a doctor's appointment today and it's a new doctor, so he has to be there a little early. Um, so and I'm not professional in any way, shape, or form, so I'm gonna probably do things where people are like, why is she doing that? Because I'm human and I can. Um, and we're not perfect and we all need to have a little grace. And so that's what we're gonna do. So anyway, um, so I sat down with him and he had actually told me after, because he could tell on our first meeting when we met with him a year prior, he could tell that I didn't want to do any of this. He could tell I didn't want to be there, that this was not, I didn't want to do IUI because that's what we were looking at that time. You know, if the reversal worked, we were wanting to do IUI because IUI was the cheaper option. It was the least invasive for me. It was going to be the least amount of medications. It was going to be, hopefully we were hoping just one shot. So that's what we were looking at. And so as we were getting ready to leave, I mean, he gave me a hug and he said, and we're talking about going to see Dr. Bush, who's out of Frisco. Um, and he said, I'll never see you again. He says, you won't be back. Um, and to his point, it wasn't mean. I mean, if I'd had a choice, I never would have been. Like, if I could have never gone back there to never have to start this process, 100% hands down would have done it. So I sat in there with him for that second appointment by myself. And I don't even remember if I told my husband I was going. I was like, I need to get this ball rolling because it's never going to get rolling if I don't do it. Um, and that's not a dig on my husband. This kind of stuff is not his area. And he's not going to make decisions on infertility and IVF and IUI by himself because this affects me way more because it's my body that's having all these things being done to it. So that's not a dig at him in any way, shape, or form. Um, and so I sat down with him. He looked at all the results and everything from all of the analysis that you have to do because once you have on this is from my perspective. This could be different for whatever doctor you're seeing, whatever doctor your husband is seeing. So all of these are going to be from my perspective and the research that I have done. So after his reversal, he had to go a month later to have an analysis done. And then he had to go a month after that. And for the longest time, it was a month. Every month he had to go have an analysis done because they needed to check to make sure that things weren't closing up and that things weren't decreasing, and that it was going in that upward progression. And then moved to every 2 months. And so when he looked at the results, he said, well, I can see that Dr. Bush is getting him ready for an IUI. He goes, that's what he's looking at doing. He goes, and he goes, there's nothing wrong with that. He goes, but in all honesty, an IUI is not going to work. Sorry, had a phone call. Got a kid who's got eye doctor appointment tomorrow. So he said there's nothing wrong with the IUI, but looking at these numbers, he goes, I'm going to be very blunt with you. IUI is not going to work. He goes, the chances of you guys getting pregnant naturally, he goes, are pretty much zero. I was like, oh, that's great. Now, with that said, if you've ever been told that, understand that the human concept and the human brain cannot wrap their brain 100% around all of this. Okay. I say 100%. Maybe there are people out there who can. My brain can't. So we're going to base it off my brain that God can do anything. And I know that for a fact. So I know that he can do anything, and that even if an earthly figure says it's not possible, it's never going to happen, they're not God. They can't control that. So even though he said that it was basically a 0% chance, he goes, I would be surprised if you did. He wasn't saying that to hurt me. He wasn't saying that to just try to get money out of me. He wanted to be, from his professional perspective, to tell me, I don't see it happening. Based off the numbers that I'm looking at on your husband's side, it's not going to happen. So he said, you have IUI and you have IVF. Now, he knew I don't like needles. He knew that. He knew that that was part of the reason why I didn't want to do this process, because I didn't want the needles. I didn't want to do the shots. And so he was going to try IUI just to try to avoid the shots. And I said, okay, well, let me ask you this. If this was your daughter who was going through this, what would you recommend for her? And he goes, IVF. He goes, I would recommend going down that route. He goes, but I know you don't like needles, so I don't want to do that to you. And so I appreciate that, but I think that maybe going through the IVF would be the better option. So how do we do that? What do we do? And so he he explained the two different things. He gave me paperwork for both options. Um, he told me different things that we can look at, different things, procedures that we can do to see what the best option is. Um, but some things that I loved about Dr. Kaufman were when he came in, he sat down in the chair, because you go into a little consultation room, and he sat down in the chair, and he he'd been hiking, um, and he had hurt his ankle. But I didn't know this at that time because he told me afterwards. But he just like took his shoes off and put his feet up on another chair and was just sitting there like we were friends. And I was like, all right, I love this, because he's blunt, he's friendly, he makes you feel comfortable, but he also doesn't sugarcoat things to coddle you. He's honest, but he makes you feel comfortable in that honesty. And so he told me, um, IVF is going to be the better route. And I said, okay, well, looking at, my husband's results, what does that, you said IUI is not going to work because, and so if you don't know what IUI is, IUI is where they take the sperm and they basically put it in as close to the egg as possible so it doesn't have to travel as far, and it increases those odds. Part of the problem with my husband's is that they they swim straight. They're supposed to swim straight, but my husband's don't. And nobody knows why. Like, I've tried to do research on that, and nobody knows why they do that. Now, you can sometimes help that with vitamins and diet and exercise and, staying out of hot tubs and not keeping computers on your lap. And so sometimes that can help, but not always. And there's no medication for it. There's no way to fix it. At least as of the last time I did research on it. So we don't know why. And what the other frustrating thing is you don't know if that's the way that it was before you have a vasectomy. And so I don't know if that's the way it was beforehand. He doesn't know. We have no idea. So of course my AC turns on and my blankets are behind me. Um, so he he said that, that's probably not going to work just because of that. And I said, okay, well then how would that affect IVF? Because I had read that you needed to have a certain number, there's parts per million of them, of the sperm per whatever the math is on that. I don't ask me. Um, and I said, because this is what his number is, what does that mean? Like, is that going to be a problem? And he goes, no. He goes, because we're going to take his piece, we're going to take your piece, we're going to put it in there, and you can get mad at me for the language I'm about to say, but I'm repeating verbatim what my doctor said. And he goes, we're going to tell his piece, this little motherfucker, you're going to do your job, and you don't have a choice. And I was like, oh, snap, crackle, pop. Okay, appreciate that. Love that. And so, and you can get offended by that if you want to. I didn't. I appreciated the bluntness. And it made me feel better because he said it with such confidence that that was how that was going to go, and that that was going to be the attitude he had toward this, that it felt like I had another fighter right there with me. And so, um, got the whole process going, talked to the 83 million people you got to talk to get everything set up. Um, and we went through the process. And in December, I went and I had a blood draw. Hated it. Almost passed out. That was fun. And then when you go through this process, you have to start on birth control because they need to control um, everything. And so had to start on that. Hate that, by the way. Never been on it before. And the only times I've ever been on it have been through this process. And I hate that crap. Um, you do it, that's fine. I'm not interested. And so then in January of 2025, we started the process. January 4th, I did my first shot. My first shot took me 30 minutes. And I cried. And I walked around my whole house 80 million times. My husband was going to do the shot for me. I couldn't let him do it because I'm a control freak and I just couldn't. I hear so many people through this process say, "Oh, I had my spouse do it." I commend you because I can't do that. Like, no, it's not happening. Um, and this is probably not going to be a short video series. Maybe the next ones will be, but this one's going to just kind of be an introduction. And then, I may read a couple things. I don't know. So it took me 30 minutes and I recorded all of the shots that I did in my stomach. So all your first ones are subcutaneous. So they were all right here, about an inch from my belly button. And so you do that for about 11 days, 12 days, twice a day, and then sometimes 3 times a day. And then you use the little ready injector pen, whatever. If you run out of that medication and it didn't hit your dose, you got to do another one. So sometimes you may have done 4 shots in a day. And that sucks because you're literally injecting your body with hormones and you are irrational and you're tired and you're crying and you're just emotional and there's nothing you can do about it. And and you hate it and you go for your blood draws and you go for, your ultrasounds and you hate it and you don't want to do it and you're tired and you're hurting and you hear people tell you, "Oh, well, think of what it's going to be like in the end. It'll all be worth it in the end." And I get it. They're trying to be positive. I hate hearing that. I hate that because you're not going through it. You don't understand. Now, the nurse that I was dealing with, I love her. She understood. She understood. Um, and so I listened to her. And I would email her just out of my mind. And there were times that I almost quit because of dealing with the lab that they use, because the lab that they use is crap. Not crap in that they don't know what they're doing with your eggs and your embryos and all that, but crap in that just the way that they run certain aspects of I guess the customer service end of it. Terrible. Um, and so, um, one thing I will recommend is when you're going through this process and you've got an analysis somewhere else, a semen analysis or semen not analysis, samples somewhere else, find out from your clinic, your lab, what the protocols are if you're going to use those to bring them over. If you have to have a medical licensed carrier, bring them over if you can bring them over. Because that was a big thing of it that I actually had somebody from this lab and I'm going to tell you the lab because I don't care, from Ovation. A guy called me who was the manager of a lab in Nevada who called me and told me that he didn't care that I couldn't get my husband's samples from point A to point B because they wanted to charge me $400 to do it. Um, and this process is not cheap, okay? Just for the egg retrieval, which is the first process that you have to go through, all of the medications, the lab fees, all of that, including your clinic, you're looking at about $23,000. And then they want another $400 from you when you're paying them almost $8,000 anyway. He basically told me that he didn't care that I wasn't willing to pay that $400 and that if I didn't, then I wasn't going to have my transfer or I wasn't going to have my egg retrieval, and that he didn't care that he was causing a problem and slowing down our process in having a baby. And I was like, "So you don't care about this?" And he goes, "No." And then had the flipping audacity to hang up on me. So I don't give 2 flying flips for Ovation Fertility. I don't. There has been one person there that I have dealt with that has not pissed me off, and her name is Jamie. And she is in their finance department, and she has helped me with anything that I have ever needed. I think she has done things that she is not in her wheelhouse of her job, just because she has known about my experience. Now, some of the people that I have dealt with in person at the office, they've been great. I've had only one problem with one of them. Didn't care for her, but apparently some other people don't either that I have talked to from other patients, I guess. Um, their names I will not tell you. So there's going to be those processes. And then in addition, you're also super, super emotional. So some of the stuff that might not bother you now might bother you when you're in this process. So you go through your egg retrieval. We went through that. Um, Pissed me off though, because they wouldn't let my husband go back there with me. They put you under. They put you under for an egg retrieval, and they wouldn't let my husband go back there with me before that, which pisses me off because you're emotional and you're tired and you're hurting because you've got all these shots and all of his hormones and everything is just bloated and you feel, oh, and they wouldn't let my husband go back there with me. Like, that's my husband. Like, he's my person, he's my people, and you're not gonna let him come back there with me? All right, that's messed up, but okay. Um, so I went through that process, and then you have to wait some time. A lot of this is based off of your cycle. So we had to wait for that, and then we had to go back on the stupid birth control, and then they tell you how many eggs they got, and then how many fertilized, and how many grew, and all that, and then how many were good enough to transfer, how many were viable. Um, and depending on your status, I don't have any history of endometriosis. I don't have any other problems at all or issues at all or anything that would cause there to be a problem. So mine, for the most part, was pretty straightforward. There are people who suffer from that who have to go through way more than what I do, whose process is going to be different. There are people who have other issues. Their process is going to be different. This is my process. This is what I had to go through. Um, and so, um, and also the financial part of it puts a huge strain on you because you're thinking about that too. And that's hard to not do. Um, and I wish that I had some good advice to not focus on it, but I don't because I did. I focus on it a lot. And so, we went through our first transfer and I had to do a blood draw, and then I had to start a pill medication called estrogen or estradiol. And then I had to go do another blood draw, and then I had to start shots basically in your butt. Did not record those because nobody needed to see that. But it's called progesterone, and it is in oil. Mine was in a sesame oil, and that oil is very thick. And so when you do that, these are intramuscular, so they have to go into the muscle using a 22 or 23 gauge needle. Those are bigger than your subcutaneous 27, 28 gauge needles. And so for all of my stomach ones, I iced because I don't do needles and I didn't want to feel it. I iced my butt for about a week and then regretted that because when I did that, it tightened everything. And so that oil couldn't move through. So it created knots, which that can do anyway. But these knots were worse. It got to the point that I couldn't sit. I couldn't hardly lay down. I couldn't sleep very well. I had a reaction to the sesame oil, which we're presuming based off of the things that I was telling the pharmacist, that instead of progesterone making me sleepy, which it's supposed to do, it kept me awake. So I would take my shot in the evening and I wouldn't go to bed till 2 o'clock in the morning. And when I say evening, I mean like 7 o'clock. But I wasn't tired and I couldn't get comfortable. And then my resting heart rate would be 108 beats per minute. And that's not good because I'd be laying down. It would be 1 in the morning and it's 108 beats per minute. I'm not doing anything. I'm just trying to lay there. So I was in a lot of pain. We tried all sorts of things, heated blankets, the I can't remember what that is, but it's the numbing cream gel, all the things, tried all the things. Quit icing, and then I just was like angry stabbing. And I would do that. And you alternate every day. So it's not like one side has knots and the other doesn't. You can sleep on one side. No, you alternate every day. And so went through that process, um, did the transfer, and you have to do the shots. For me, I had to do them until 10 weeks. First transfer failed. And so that was heartbreaking. So we tried again immediately. I had to go back into the shots. Got knots again. Um, Second transfer successful until it wasn't. Um, it was successful until I was about a month, and then miscarriage happened. And for me, my belief is that um, life begins at conception. So as soon as that attached, that's when life began. So as soon as they transferred that embryo and it attached and it started doing the things that it's supposed to do, that became life. And so that was hard, very hard. So thankfully, my doctor did not call me that day that I got that news that it um, went from a positive to a negative. He called me the next day and he's like, I'm not going to bother asking how you're doing, how you're feeling. He goes, because I know. Like crap. Well, at least he knows. And so, and you have people who don't believe that you miscarried, that that was a real baby. But it is. And you don't have people who, and you, or rather, you have people who don't understand the process of IVF. They don't understand how everything works. And so they say things or they do things that I don't think that they mean to be insensitive, but it is. You have people that don't understand that there are 3 blood tests that you have to do after a transfer. You go 9 days after your transfer. For me, you have your first blood draw. If that's positive, you go back 2 days later and you want those numbers to double. From whatever the first numbers were, you want them to double. And then you go back a week after that if that second test is positive. And the numbers need to at least quadruple. And then after that, if they have, you schedule I think it was a sonogram. And that's when you can hopefully hear the heartbeat, um, maybe get a picture, that's what you do from there. And you stay, again, mine, you stay with the fertility clinic until you're through your first trimester. Um, but if the first test is negative, you don't go back. And you have people that don't understand that. And so when we had our first transfer and it was negative, um, and people knew about it, they were like, oh, well, you've got another one you can go do, and maybe it'll be different. And you're like, really? No, pay attention when I told you this before. And that happens. And they don't mean to be that way, but they don't listen and they don't understand the process because it's not something that they worry about. And it's not something that they understand because it's not something that they had to go through. And so um that's hard and it sucks. And our second time through, it was heartbreaking because you get so excited and you start to think and then you start to figure out, well, when's the due date? And then when you get that horrible news that it's not, and now you go into your mind and you go, well, at this time I should be 4 months. At this time I should be 5 months. And because um, at this moment I should be about 6 months and I'm not. And that's hard. Especially when you're around people who are pregnant and they're complaining about it. Like they're complaining that they're just over it. And I get that because for you, maybe that's a struggle. Maybe you like the kid aspect of it, but you don't like the pregnancy aspect of it. But also, I would trade places with you in a heartbeat. In a heartbeat, I would trade places with you. So, it was in May when I learned about the miscarriage. And unfortunately, I'm pretty sure, I'm about 98% sure I know the day that it happened too. And it's hard not to blame yourself because if you know the day, then you're going in your brain, what did I do wrong? Did I do something I shouldn't have? Did I drink something I shouldn't have? Did I eat something I shouldn't have? Did I lift something too heavy? Did I twist the wrong way? And that's hard to go through that and not know what caused it, if anything caused it. And I think the majority of the time it was nothing. There's nothing you did, nothing you could have done. In my doctor's office, my doctor made really, they said it's not you. You didn't do anything wrong. But that's still hard because you still beat yourself up because of it. Um, but but then you have to wait. My doctor said, you have to wait at least a month because if you try again too soon, the chances of another miscarriage increase. And he goes, we don't want to do that. So, um, I had someone at one point say to me, they meant it with all the love in the world, that to be careful of my doctor, to make sure he wasn't just trying to get money out of me. And I started thinking about it. I was like, I don't feel like that's what he's trying to do, because he could be suggesting all of these different procedures that I would need to have done and then insisting that I do them. But when the first transfer failed, I went back in and I sat down with him and he said we could do this, this, or this. He goes, I don't recommend this yet because I think we do another transfer. If it doesn't stick, then we look at this. Okay. And that was the HSG test to see if there was fluid in my tubes, because that could be leaking into the uterus and causing problems. Um, Another one was a blood test to see if my blood was too thick, which can cause problems. And I'm going to be honest, I can't remember the third one because he said that the likelihood of that was very, very slim, so we didn't even focus on it. Um, so we did the blood test and everything was fine, because if it was too thick, then I would have to do a subcutaneous shot as well as the progesterone shot in my butt. I hate those shots. Hate them. I also hate, I'm gonna go on a tangent for a second. I also hate that none of this is covered by insurance except those stupid progesterone shots, because progesterone is something that your body produces naturally when you're pregnant, and some people don't produce enough. So insurance most of the time will cover that in sesame oil, but not the other two kind of oils because they're considered a compound. So if you've got an insurance that covers any of that, keep it. Um, they don't cover anything else. Because there are progesterone and oil, there are 3 different types. And then there are suppositories that you can do, but insurance won't cover those at all. Now, those are $35 to $40 for one applicator. One. You do the math. From day one, you have to start those injections or the applicators 5 days for me before my transfer. So you have to count from there. With an applicator, you have to do 2 a day, generally, sometimes 3, depending on the type that you have. But Crenone 8%, which is the most popular one, is twice a day, one in the morning and one at night. And you have to do that from 5 days before your transfer all the way up to 10 weeks. So to math it all out, you need roughly between 116 and 120. That is around $4,500 that insurance will not cover. I think that's a huge problem, because they will pay for you to have a hysterectomy. They will pay for your husband to have a vasectomy, but they won't pay for a reversal of the vasectomy, and they won't pay for you to get your tubes untied if you got them tied. They won't pay for any of that. So they'll pay for you to rob yourself of the ability to have children, but they won't pay for you to have the ability to do it, which you don't even want to get me started on that, because I can go down a rabbit trail and all of that, and I can turn this every which way that I believe is the reason why. We're not going to get into that. If you want to know, I can tell you that. But so another medication that you can have is called endometrine, which is 3 times a day generally. And that one is usually about $10 per applicator. So you're looking at way less. And sometimes insurance will cover that one. That one is hit or miss because it can also be used to treat endometriosis. So, but what really chaps me is that you can get Crenone in Canada for $14 an applicator. You can get Crenone in Italy for $7 an applicator. And that pisses me off because why is it that we're paying so much more for something here when it is the exact same ingredients there, but we're paying 3 times as much, 5 times as much? Are you kidding me? So anyway, um, I'll bring it back to this. So right now, where we're at is because I didn't fit into a particular mold in a work environment at a job that I had, I didn't fit into what the particular manager that they had brought in. I didn't fit into what this particular person wanted. They got rid of me. Um, I'm not going to say the company. Um, and so I lost my job. And that was what we were using to pay for this treatment, to pay for this process. So we were going to try it again in August, September. And then I thought, well, maybe November. Maybe November when we can have a longer period, maybe before Thanksgiving, because um then we won't have to do anything. We won't have to, both of the boys, they do karate. So we won't have to take them to karate because they'll be closed. We won't have to do school because I homeschool them. We won't have to do any of that because it's Thanksgiving. Do it the week before Thanksgiving when everything is kind of calming down. I'm not cooking Thanksgiving dinner this year, so I didn't have to do any of that. Just be able to sit and relax and not have to go wash windows because I own a window cleaning business, not have to do any of that. Just relax. Well, losing my job killed all of that. It shut down my dream. Um, my husband also lost his job. Thankfully, he's got one. I mean, he had one quick. His particular field, he's golden. So, um, but I still don't have one because I homeschool the boys, so I have to work from home. And people don't want to do that. They've sort of, because people didn't work during what I refer to as the stupid, which is COVID. A lot of people are making you go back into the office now because other people didn't work, and so I can't go into an office. And I'm not going to because I can't. Neither one of my boys can go to public school. Um, the oldest one was falling through the cracks. The little one's behavior was violent, way worse than it was before he was in his particular class. And so home was the best place for them. And me being formally homeschooled with the same curriculum that they're using, I knew that I would be able to help them. Um, and so that's what we're doing. Um, so we're kind of at a standstill now, which is hard because it's that money aspect that I kind of talked very, very briefly about earlier. It's difficult, and you think about that a lot, and you don't know what to do, and you don't know how are we going to make this? How are we going to, finance this? What are we going to do? And for me, it's hard because um, I've given up on a lot of dreams, a lot. And this was one that I wasn't really willing to give up on, but it kind of seems like I don't have a choice anymore because other things are taking precedent. So my dream gets put to the back burner again, and that's hard. And it's not, I don't think it's intentional, but it just keeps happening. And so that's hard. So, oh, sorry. I told you I was gonna cry, but I try not to, especially since I don't have any tissues in here. But I was wanting to do it before Thanksgiving, and that's just not gonna happen now. I do have some fabulous people in my life outside of my family, but I have a friend who she stays up late at night because she homeschools her kids too, and so during nights where it was just rough and I couldn't do it. Why I just did that. Sorry, I don't know why it's being all foggy. Oh, my dog's gonna come join us. Hi, baby. What are you doing? Did you wake up from a nap? Yeah. Um, and so, ma'am, you've got to learn how to close doors. Yes, you do. And so, um, she would stay up with me and talk to me and just try to, help me feel better. And then I was sitting, 2 weeks ago, not this past Sunday, but the Sunday before. Um, so the last Sunday in September of 2025, I was sitting with a friend of mine and I was telling her about all of this. And it was actually her sister who, um, gave me this doctor's information and everything. And was talking about the medications and everything. And she found a pharmacy that will ship to the US because it's not here. Um, that will ship to the US. Same medication. Everything is the exact same. The only thing that's different is the packaging. That's it. I looked at everything, but you can get that medication for the Cronone 8% for several $1,000s less. Now, with that said, I do not recommend you doing anything, ordering anything without talking to your doctor. I am not a doctor. I am not a lawyer. Don't take anything that I'm saying as gospel truth, okay? But when we do get back to that process, get back to that starting point of doing all of this, I will be showing that to my doctor and I will be asking him, can we do this? Because $1,000 is much better than $4,500, $5,000. I can figure out 1,000. I can't figure out five, not when in the time frame that you have to have it in. So, um, you know, that's part of that, So, um, then you have your clinic fees again, and you have your lab fees, and all of that has to be paid beforehand. You can't pay for any of that after. With my doctor's office, my lab, you can't do that after. Maybe yours you can. If you can, I love that for you. Um, so um, that's where we're at in this process. And so as I've struggled with this, um, that's when it kind of turned to these books. I'd bought these books before we began this process, before we began the IVF, and I wanted to to have something to help me because I knew that I was going to need God anyway. Um, but I wasn't ready to give it all to him. So I'm gonna do just a little bit. We're probably not gonna do day one just yet because I've been on here for almost an hour and I do have a doctor's appointment today. Yearly checkups. Yay. Um, so again, all of this credit here, everything that I'm reading, all of it goes to, for this one, Waiting in Hope. All of that is Kelly Ramsey and Jen Hess or Hesse. I'm not going to pretend I can pronounce it correctly. But so everything that I'm reading here is theirs. It's not, none of this is mine. Just my answers will be it. So, um, you know, something that I want everybody to know is that, as we're going through this, understand that it's not easy and it is an emotional roller coaster of insanity. Um, so as I read this introduction to you, and I'm going to be honest, I didn't check to make sure that I could do this. So if I can't, then I will be paraphrasing a lot of things as we go through this. But for now, I'm going to read this word for word. And again, none of this is my story. This is all, for this particular one, this is all, it's all Kelly and Jen. So I'm just going to read this introduction. And then if it comes, I can't remember if there was an introduction for the 31 days. So I'm going to look at that. Yeah. So I'm going to read those introductions just to kind of give you a segue into that. And then I think I'll be done for today because this is going to be like an hour long. And the next ones probably won't be quite as long because it's going to be mostly going into this. This was just kind of introduction, tell my story, give my experience on this. So the introduction for waiting and hope, it says, your source of hope. Dear friend, waiting is painful. You know this. You felt the ache sharpen every month that passes without a baby in your arms. We understand and are so sorry you're facing these struggles. Trying to navigate the wait for a child can be a lonely journey. Few people understand what it's like to obsess over menstrual charts or inject fertility shots into your belly or toss box after box of negative pregnancy tests into the trash. We're sad that you're hurting, but we're glad you chose to pick up this book. Taking this step shows that you're looking for a source of hope. The waiting. The strange thing about waiting is that it forces us to go somewhere with our pain. While we might feel stuck in limbo, the desperation to find relief actually propels us into motion, seeking strength greater than our own. No matter your belief system, at some point your journey of waiting for a child will intersect with your journey of faith. This book can be your companion on that journey. It won't give you answers to every question you have or fill you with empty promises God's word never makes. Instead, we'll be the friends who understand your sorrow, comfort you with care, and remind you of truth. We can understand and write about these struggles because we've lived them. Our individual journeys of waiting may be different, but they mirror the same themes. In many ways, we continue to relieve our seasons of infertility using the wisdom we learned then to guide us now. And we believe you can gain the same life-giving wisdom as you travel along this hard path. So Jen's story, sorry. I had it all planned out in college. Get married, have 2 biological kids, then adopt 2 kids. My grand scheme started off on the right track when I met and married my husband. But the plan quickly fell apart when we began trying to grow our family. Besides not getting pregnant, I would suffer from excruciating cramps that lasted all month. Doctors performed several tests and 2 surgeries to repair my uterus and remove endometriosis. With desperation setting in, my husband and I turned to fertility treatments, going through 8 rounds of unsuccessful I believe this is IUI. I'm not gonna pretend that I can pronounce nope, not gonna happen. IUI. And a and a failed in vitro fertilization cycle, which is IVF. During that time, my husband and I began pursuing domestic adoption. 2 months after our IVF devastation, we submitted our profile to a birth mother who had just delivered a baby boy. The next day, we picked up our son from the hospital and became parents overnight. Less than 2 years later, God surprised us again. I got pregnant naturally and gave birth to our second son. Fast forward 7 years. Upon hitting 40, I assumed God had run out of miracles, but he wasn't done. I got pregnant a second time and delivered our third son in 2021. The same year, Kelly and I started writing this book. Our family is thankful and in awe of the Lord. My story shows God's faithfulness despite my doubt. As I wrestled with how God wasn't fulfilling my desires, when and how I wanted, he gave me the grace to persevere and a passion for encouraging others, prompting me to start a local infertility and infant loss support group. Even after God brought me children, he has used seasons of waiting to draw my heart toward him. So that's one of those things where doctors don't know everything because God made that happen. And you will hear a lot where people say, "Oh, we'll just relax and it'll come." Don't tell that to people who are going through this. We don't want to hear that. Shut up. I'm a blunt person in case you haven't figured out, so I apologize if I offend you, but don't be offended. Kelly's story. I wasn't as surprised as most women are to discover I had fertility issues. From an early age, I sensed deep down that my desire to be a mother would be hard to fulfill. Having painful periods since adolescence and a mother with a history of miscarriages meant my prognosis looked bleak. After 7 months of negative tests, my OBGYN sent me to a fertility specialist. He diagnosed me with low estrogen and ovulation, propelling me onto a path of impossible to decipher medical jargon and procedures. Believing that I wasn't the only one struggling with these issues, I asked my church for help. We began a women's support group with 2 friends who were also facing infertility. I was thankful to no longer be alone and have a community of sisters who understood me. My life has been a fast track through pain, trials, and worst case scenarios. Yet God was always near, whispering, "I'm here. Do you trust me?" By God's grace, I've lived through 22 years of chronic pain, infertility, 3 miscarriages, 2 miraculous children conceived without treatments, and a delivery with severe complications. Today, my family and I are closer to God and pursuing our dream of adopting another child. Through starting Waiting in Hope Ministries, I've experienced healing in my heart. It has been an honor to walk alongside thousands of women and couples during the past 10 years. I continually lead them toward this healing, knowing it will affect every area in their lives. My infertility story prepared me for hardships and unknowns in a way nothing else could. to know your story. We desire to be friends, the friends you feel like you know, even though we've never met. We would love for you to connect with us and hundreds of women through our Waiting and Hope community. Whether you're waiting alongside your spouse or as a single woman longing for marriage and motherhood, we want you to know you're not alone. During our years of infertility ministry, we've witnessed women from all walks and seasons of life embrace their wait, allowing the hard circumstances to shape them into beautiful new creations in Christ. That's our desire for you as you read this book. The 31 chapters are divided into 4 sections, leading you through the emotional, spiritual, and relational aspects of the waiting journey, followed by thoughts to consider as you continue forward and find resolution in your waiting. Each chapter includes reflection questions, a prayer prompt, and journaling space. You may choose to read the whole book in 31 days, but don't feel pressured to rush. Maybe read a few chapters this month, then more next month, and the month after. Linger in a chapter or section if you need time to think about a specific topic. Go at a pace that works best for you. Read on your own, with a friend, or as part of your support group. See the About Waiting in Hope Ministries section at the end of this book for information on our nationwide network of support groups and church resources. Our prayer is that this book will shine a light into the darkest corners of your struggle, revealing the glory of our Savior who died to give you life. May you see his unfailing goodness and grasp his unfading hope. And there's a verse here, but it's ESV. I don't read ESV, so we're going to grab this from the King James. It's going to be Psalm 27:14. So King James says in Psalm 27:14, wait on the Lord, be of good courage, and he shall strengthen thine heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord. So, that's the end of that introduction there. And I'm actually just going to read this one for today. But it's hard to wait. It is. You don't want to. You're impatient. But it's something we have to work on, and that's something that I'm still working on and that I know that I need to accomplish. So with that, this is over an hour long. I apologize for that, but I hope that this at least let people know that we're all human and that it's okay to share your struggles. It's okay to share what you're going through. And I just hope that maybe something I've said helps you in any way, because it all sucks and we need to be there for each other. And that's hard because we don't want to be hurt. So I'm going to end this with a prayer. And then next time we'll kind of go into the other 31-day prayer there with Lisa Newton. But with that, we're going to bow our heads in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you so much for you giving me the strength and the courage to share my story with others who are going through similar struggles that I am, Lord. We know, Lord, that you gave us this desire as women to have children, and that you want us to accomplish this, Lord, and that you are the one who holds all that power. And we pray, Lord, that you grant us the right spirit and the ability to trust in you, Lord, that you guide us through this and protect us and give us your strength. And we pray, Lord, that we will submit ourselves to you and give you all that glory and that hope that we have, Lord, that we give it all to you and we say, we don't want this pain, Lord. We don't want this uncertainty. We give it to you and you do with it as you please. And we pray that you give us a calm and right spirit. And we ask, Lord, all of this knowing that you are the one in control, knowing that you gave us this desire for a reason, and that everything will come to fruition the way you want it to. We thank you, Lord, for sending your Son to die on the cross for us, to give us the ability to be with you in heaven. We ask all these things, giving you all the glory, the praise, and the honor. In your name and in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you for staying with me for this hour and almost 5 minutes. I hope that this was a help, and I hope to see you guys soon.